Thank you for having me. I think it's the first time that I speak in this forum. Good morning, everybody. I'm a digital immigrant, I hope that you allow me to be here. I feel very protected about being just under the rostrum. As I said, it's an honor to be here today. I'm the Director General of CEN, the European Committee for Standardization, and CENELEC, the European Committee for Electrotechnical Standardization. And these are two regional bodies because, you know, Europe have got many countries. In CEN and CENELEC, we have got 34 members, which are the national standards bodies. And our work is based on consensus of the different expertise in Europe. Market-driven, and we are actually trying to get all the stakeholders involved in the standards making. Something that is very important in the European standardization system, and I think it's very important to repeat every time, is that we are supporting the single market, and the single market has got many countries that are involved. When we deliver a European standard, I mention again market-driven, mainly driven by industry, but of course we have got small and big enterprises, consumers, trade unions, environmental organizations. When we publish a European standard, all the national conflicting standards are withdrawn, which means technical harmonization for the single market. So we are not here only to discuss about cybersecurity standards. I hope that we manage to shape cybersecurity standards together. And the real question is not what we build, but the real question actually is the technology that we designed, the infrastructure that we designed, who's benefiting from that? Do they protect the citizens? Do they uphold to democratic values? Do we try to reinforce autonomy, sovereignty, security? And do we have the trust that we need in digital interactions? How can we safeguard the Europe's ability to shape their own digital path? So standards, or the standards that we produce, are trying to develop to support people. Technology is here to serve people and not the other way around. And we believe this is the heart of digital sovereignty. That's how we are trying to treat also the standards development process in Europe. And the cloud lies in all this digital transformation. So the EU drives forward digital agenda. We must ensure not only security, we must ensure not only sovereignty and the data that is the one powering this digital transformation, but also a cloud ecosystem that is resilient, interoperable, and as far as possible, European by design. I'm not sure Dave will agree with me, but okay. So digital sovereignty should not be longer aspirational in Europe. It should be essential and a fundamental requirement for shaping the Europe that I hope we all want for the 21st century. So, and part of the answer to the questions I made before is in the foundational role of European standardization, which empower us, business, governments, consumers, customers, environmental organizations, trade unions, to shape and to create a technology that serves the people. And standards build trust. Cybersecurity is the cornerstone of trust. And that's why it's so important that we have robust cybersecurity standards to support the cloud in Europe. So in Europe, you know that there is, we have been here in Dave also speaking about regulated, and indeed there is significant regulation that is being developed in the last years. We have got the Cybersecurity Act, and I will speak a little bit on that, the Data Act, we have artificial intelligence also. We are now working on maybe quantum, and there are several standards also on that. And the idea here is that there is a strategic legislation being developed that is supported by robust standards. In the case of cybersecurity, robust cybersecurity standards to build a single market. And trust, innovation, and competitiveness go hand in hand. Standards are not just technical specifications. Don't be mistaken. They are tools of empowerment, and they empower industry, they empower customers, they empower consumers. They provide a common language. I mean, we heard before also about different definitions. What we try to do in the standards world is to agree on a common language that can ensure interoperability. They reduce dependency on proprietary systems. This is what standards do. They ensure interoperability. And they are kind of invisible architecture that secure sovereign and future-proof digital services. So we believe, and that's how we are developing or trying to develop European standards, or the experts in Europe are trying to develop the standards, is that Europe, what it's trying to do is to reduce excessive over-reliance on external suppliers, and ensuring that digital infrastructures, including cloud computing and edge technology, are not only secure, but also aligned with European values and European governance. This is something that is becoming more and more important considering the volatility and the uncertainty that we have in the world. And we try to contribute to this mission. So we are trying to build a strategic portfolio of standards that reflects Europe's needs on critical sectors like cloud computing, data protection, and interoperability. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I mean, we have 500 technical committees, but they are not all working on cloud, please. So it's, but we cover a very diverse sector area. So we have a joint technical committee that is the Joint Technical Committee 25, that is data management, spaces, cloud, and edge, that was launched in 2024, and address the basis of foundational areas for digital sovereignty. What are the standards that this Joint Technical Committee 25 is defining? Cloud and data governance, data quality, portability, life cycle management, interoperability, portability, and cloud switching, ID management methodologies, and organizational frameworks, evaluation schemes of digital processes and products. And these standards are not just theory. Standards are the implementation, in many cases, of legal requirements into the market. They are really designed to be actionable tools that can be used by business and can be used by government. They try also to address the complexity of cloud sovereignty, and at the same time, I mentioned before, ensuring secure services and privacy. Our work is currently underpinning the EU Data Act, and the stage is, what we are trying to do is creating trusted data spaces and supporting this legal framework. I don't know if you understand or if you have been familiar how the European standards supporting legislation work, but there is a legislation, and then there is a committee, that is the Committee on Standards, that give an opinion on whether the 3 European standards bodies, SENS and ELEC, the ones that I direct, but there is a third one, ETSI, can support the implementation of that legislation with European standards. This has been the case for the cloud and for data, for the Trusted Data Act, and we have received, and this is really fresh news because it has just been approved, the standardization request for SENS and ETSI on the EU Traced Data Act and the framework. So we are starting to work via the Joint Technical Committee 25 in making those standards to support legislation. And I was supposed to speak about cybersecurity, so this works hand in hand with the Joint Technical Committee 13, which is cybersecurity and data protection. Again, implementing a request from the European legislator to translate European legal requirements into practical approaching the market to be able to comply with those legal requirements. This is not that easy because, of course, there is a lot of room for interpretation in the process, and we need to have a lot of expertise in the technical committees to be able to deliver something that is actionable, as I mentioned before. So. But we are not working alone. I mean, standardization is just part of the components of the European quality infrastructure. We are currently, and we have just also established a network that is the European Quality Infrastructure Network, where we work with accreditation, we work with conformity assessment, we work with metrology, and we work with market surveillance, which I understand is also extremely important. One of the greatest strengths in Europe, you heard me speaking about 34 national standards bodies, national committees. What we try to do with the national delegation principle is that to be inclusive, so that we have many official languages in Europe also. And even if in SEN and SENDELEC we work in English, French, and German, 95% of our standards are developed in English. Then our national members make sure that small and medium-sized enterprises, or those that don't feel so at ease speaking other languages, can also participate in the standards-making process and bring their knowledge and input to the European standardization system. In the European ecosystem, we believe it's also very important to work with other key operators that are supporting cybersecurity or that are supporting data or any other piece of legislation. So we have got a very strong cooperation with ENISA, the European Agency for Cybersecurity, and also we work very close with the European Commission and with ETSI, as I mentioned before, the third European standard organization. So together, what we try to do, and believe me, it's not easy, that regulations like the Radio Equipment Directive, you know, so there was a moment in my life in which I understood that the fridge could be a radio equipment. And then we were mandated to develop European standards to support the Radio Equipment Directive and cybersecurity requirements for that. By the way, the standards for cybersecurity for the Radio Equipment Directive were published in the official journal just in January. But what we try to do is that piece of legislation, the Radio Equipment Directive, the regulation of electronic identification of trusted services, the known like eIDAS, or the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, or the NIS Directive, which establish the rules for cybersecurity in Europe, are consistent. And this is the big challenge that we have also today. Not to work in silos, but to manage to get consistency between all the different pieces of legislation that in which, or with what industry is being confronted. So we really try to build an open and secure and trusted digital future. We need robust cybersecurity standards. I mentioned that before. And this affects every sector, every citizen, and every service. It is really a pan-sectoral issue. And it impacts everything from cloud services and data protection to industrial systems or critical infrastructures. The EU has recognized cybersecurity as one of the primary standardization priorities. This is why the European Union and hence they have also put some pressure on the European standards bodies, has placed cybersecurity at the top of the standardization activities. Our Joint Technical Committee 13 on cybersecurity and data protection works in two work streams, because you have heard me speak a lot about Europe, what Europe needs, the importance of having this single market and to get together all the different stakeholders, member states, national bodies in Europe, which is, believe me, a hard job. But we don't want to have a kind of fortress Europe. Standardization is very important also to rely on knowledge, on experience, on work that has been done at international level. So our Joint Technical Committee 13 that is working on cybersecurity actually has got two work streams. There is one work stream that builds on what has happened or what is happening at international level. And just to give an example, there is a standard. We have a big portfolio of standards, but I always say I like to speak about the babies. So I will give the number of the standard. Maybe it's not so attractive, but for those that are working on them, it is very important. So it's the ISO IEC, it will be now it's a project of European standard based on an international standard, ISO IEC 15408. There is several standards in the same series from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and it goes from cybersecurity and private protection, evaluation criteria for IT security, from a general model to predefined packages of security requirements. So this is one of the work streams. Let's see what is happening at international level, and we have got a very smart way to work together and not to duplicate efforts, and make that happen as a European standard, which means all the national standards bodies adopt the standard and withdraw national conflicting standards. This is a unique model in the world. The second work stream is, okay, we have got a lot of pressure from our European regulators and from industry, because to develop an international standards take normally longer than to develop a European standard. I mean, there are many more countries that are involved in the development of an international standard. So we have got a work stream to rapidly address European needs, and we work on purely what we call purely European standards. That then we try to also shared with the international community for them to become international standards. And for instance, I'm going to give an example of a very interesting standard that is being developed to reply to the mandate on the Cyber Resilience Act, which is cybersecurity requirements for products with digital elements, vulnerability handling, or principles of cyber resilience. So we need to make sure that our standards are robust, inclusive, and future-ready. And there are several experts that are already working on cybersecurity. And we aim to ensure that both cloud service providers and end users can trust the system. That's why inclusiveness is very important in the standards making process. I always say the wider the participation in the standardization, the wider the market acceptance. Don't underestimate that when using standards. So also I think it's interesting to mention in relation not to cybersecurity but to cloud, the work that is being done by the Joint Technical Committee 25 on interoperability and cloud switching. Actually, there is a draft standard that is in the pipeline. And it's very important because freedom of choice depends on the ability to switch providers without fear of disruption or login. And this is what the standards try to provide. And interoperability is the precondition of trust. None of this would be possible if we wouldn't have in Europe a legislative practice that is called the new legislative framework, which is not new, as you know, but it's called like that. The new legislative framework is from my point of view, one of the best regulatory practices in Europe, where the regulator establishes the requirements that need to be fulfilled by the products and services that are placed on the market. And those that place products and services in the market can develop voluntary market-driven standards, translating the legal requirements into real practice. But this needs to be done by consensus and taking into account all interested parties. So the new legislative framework, and there are like 49 pieces of European legislation that are within this NLF, ensure that harmonized European standards support legislation, enable cross-border trade. One European standard, all the national conflicting standards are withdrawn, and it's a very, very transparent process where we try to build is trust. And this NLF is complemented by the regulation on European standardization, which is by default our regulation, the regulation that establishes the requirements for the European standards organizations. This is Regulation 1025, and is currently under revision. What we'll try, and then you need to hear this because it's very important for me, that in the revision of the Regulation 1025 that is just starting, we need that the changes or the revision address or provide a regulation that reflects the current geopolitical and technological realities. When we had the regulation in 2012, we didn't have the situation that we have today. That guarantees fast, effective delivery of harmonized standards. And we take our part in there, the European standards bodies, and I trust the Commission also is putting in place some actions in order to make sure that when we offer a standard for citation to provide support to the legislation, it doesn't stay for 11 months without being cited in the official journal and hence not providing presumption of conformity. Builds on the proven strengths of this public-private partnership. It's very important that standards are market-driven and that we manage to have a compromise between what the regulators want and the support of the public interest with what the market can actually deliver and the timing that these standards can be implemented. That support flexible and fit-for-purpose solutions. I have been speaking about the European standards, the ENs. I'm Spanish, I suppose that by my accent you have acknowledged that. I always say that the ENs are the pata negra of the European, I don't know if you know, it's a wonderful ham, very close to my region in Spain, but there are other kind of deliverables that we can produce in Europe based on consensus, but not maybe with such a high level of consensus. And then we need to find the right balance between consensus and time to market, what is needed in order to ensure competitiveness and support of public interest. And enables Europe to act strategically. And I think this is very, very important and timely after Dave's speech. The European standardization system must not be reactive. It must be bold, it must be modern, and forward-looking. And we have a chance with the revision of the regulation to act and to make the changes that we need. We must do more. I don't know, how many of you work in European standards? Okay. So we must ensure that the standardization process reflects the diversity in our society. I'm the vice president of Women for Cyber Foundation. I don't see many women here, by the way. I would like to see more. I'm sorry I have to say that. And I think it's extremely important, as I mentioned before, the wider the participation, the wider the market acceptance. And it's extremely important that we take that into consideration when we contribute. And the standards don't just come from the sky. We need experts that are actually contributing to, and there is a lot of benefits. If not, we wouldn't have so many companies that are working on a standardization. I think that we need to reveal the secret. Everyone has a role to play. The standardization must reflect the diversity in our society. And what we try to do, again, is to combine regulators with civil society and, of course, industry needs. I encourage all of you to actively participate in the standardization process. I don't know if I would be invited ever again to this forum in Europe. I would like that next time I make the question, I have some hands up. And the journey ahead is very challenging. But I am optimistic by default, and I think that we will manage also to, in some years, look back and say, okay, we took the right decision. We work on a standardization process that is going to help Europe to support emerging technologies, AI. I didn't mention AI, but we are also working on a standardization request on artificial intelligence that is extremely challenging. Quantum computing, 5G, 6G, and redefine the threat landscape. The landscape is, as I said, with a lot of vulnerability, with a lot of uncertainty. And the EU digital goals that we support with the standards, the European Green Deal, the cybersecurity strategy, set a roadmap. But roadmaps that are not implemented are not, doesn't have any value. So we really need to engage on the success of this transformation on a secure and sovereign cloud service to support this digital transformation. And we believe that with the standards, I mean, this is not the panacea. As I said, I'm Spanish. I always say standards are not el bálsamo de Fierabras. I don't know if you have read El Quijote, but this is a kind of balsam that could cure every disease. Standards are not the bálsamo de Fierabras, but I think can help to actually support some of the high-level objectives of spreading the European values and the governance together with a robust technology service providers in Europe with standards. So in Senelec, together with our partners, and here I can mention, of course, Industry First, those that are already committed to European standardization, the European Commission, and ETSI, industry in general, and the civil society. We are really committed to shape the standards for the future. We are ready. We are ready to build. But we need the work from experts, and we need that our standards work for people. And then I close my loop. So I hope that we can really build a very robust portfolio of cybersecurity, cloud standards, artificial intelligence, and all the set of deliverables that can support European competitiveness while supporting public interest. So thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.
Many thanks, Elena.
I need to stay here, no? Because I don't have a mic.
Yes, sure, absolutely. So again, we had several questions in the chat, so I will select one for you right now. Question is, did you build a common core standards to apply in each sector and national laws by countries?
Okay, I cannot answer about national laws, but one of the standards that I mentioned that is not yet developed, is under development, is actually defining the cybersecurity requirement per sector. So to make the evaluation of the vulnerabilities per sector.
Wonderful.
This is work in progress.
Yeah, and I'll ask you a second one because we have, since the answer was quite clear here. Do you see also the sovereign needs in other parts of the world, like Canada or Asia, for instance?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, geopolitics is extremely important, and we need to take that into account. And we really think it's important to work with like-minded partners in the standardization community also. So we in Senelec, we have got a lot of agreements with other part of the world. With Canada, it's the Standards Council of Canada. With Asia, with Korea, we have got some. Whenever, I mean, for the time, I mentioned before, it really depends on the time to deliver. But we need to try to work all together to address the challenges that we are facing. So the answer to that question is yes. I think that I see that need in other regions of the world, and I think it's extremely important to work in a partnership in order to make the best of the expertise that is available in the world and willing to work in that direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Elena.
You're welcome.